Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Run Till You're Done. This week's guest is one part of Run Llama coaching community, as well as having a fascinating running background himself. He joins us tonight to talk about exciting events fast approaching this year. Welcome to the show, John O'Donnell.
Thanks very much, guys. It's a pleasure to be here to join you in such a popular media forum that you've got here. So thanks for the invite.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming on. So the first question that we ask every single guest that comes on is, how did you first get into running?
First getting into running, well, it depends how far you want to go back. So I was a pretty good runner in high school. I had a bit of a natural ability. So always kind of like top three in my year consistently. And then life got in the way through my 20s and 30s and started piling on the weight. Had a moment of reflection in my late 30s and just how much my physical shape had changed. Excuse me. And that's what prompted me to take it up again. And I went right back to basics, started going along, had a friend that was right into park run. At that time, it was my idea of hell, turning up, a couple of hundred folk on a Saturday morning, luminous gear on, donut water bottles, you hope they're having to talk to strangers. But he dragged me along and I got absolutely hooked, utterly hooked from it, on it, right from the off. And I suppose it's not an uncommon story, but quite quickly the time started falling. I definitely had that natural ability. So the time started kind of come down quite quickly. And so did the waistline. And that was all I needed for as motivation to keep going. So I was 39. I'm 51 now. So I was 39 when I did that first park run. So I was a very late starter. But again, I don't think that's an uncommon story. So yeah, that's what got me into running initially. And then it went from there to 10Ks, half marathons, and then somebody planted a seed about doing an ultra. And for long enough, I thought, that's for other folk, it's not for little old me. But yeah, it's been a great 10 years or so. But no, that's how I get into it, Nikki, if I'm being truthful. It was a moment of reflection on my second bottle of wine one Friday night and the wrong side of 14 stone.
So at 39, you started park run again, or you started running again, did park run. How sort of steep a curve before you ended up doing the sort of distances you're doing now?
It's probably, I don't know, I don't have an exact timeline, but kind of year one, maybe two, was all about park runs. I was obsessed with park runs. I say my time was quite quickly into the sub 20 club. Then it was sub 19, and I was just hooked on it. Joined Githnock North around then. As my daughter started doing athletics, I started going along and assisting the coaches there. So that kind of got me into, some of the smaller kind of road races. A lot of the road runners do, the Brian Goodwins and you'll know the ones. I mean, the Troons, etc. The 10Ks, and then there was the whole cross country season. I was doing relays with the senior guys, and which I absolutely loved, running about muddy fields and first thing on Saturday morning. Might only have been 5, 6, 7 kilometres, but what a laugh. So slowly but surely, the competitive distances were creeping up. But again, things like marathons and that, it never crossed my mind. And it's that kind of imposter syndrome I think runs through a lot of us. I was just always, that's no for me, that's for somebody else. So I think, I remember exactly when it was. I was on holiday, random, I know, but I was on holiday in Cuba as a family, and we met a Danish family, and we had it off really, really, really nice. Still keep in touch to this day. And he was quite keen on his marathons, and so he planted the seed. he invited us over to their place, and I ended up doing their local marathon in Aalborg in the north of Denmark. So I trained properly for it. Took it on, I thought if Mads and Jan can do it, then I can do it. So that's what we did. We went over for a long weekend. I did the marathon, and I don't know, I can't remember the exact number. It was like 3:15. And I was like first foreign finisher or something like that, and I was like, I got a special prize this wee village. It was like hilarious. So that kind of, I suppose I was bitten by the bug then, knowing that I was capable of doing it, and in a fairly respectable time as well. When, if I'm being truthful, I didn't, even at that point, still didn't really know what I was doing. I was probably following some kind of plan or making it up as I went along. Just a basic increase in volume, a wee bit every week for 16 weeks. And just hoping that it worked on the day, kind of thing. And very, very basic, but it got me that result. So for my first, and then it was a case of, right, what's the next one? What's the next one? What's the next one? And I ended up doing Loch Ness like three times in a row because I loved Loch Ness that much, and that's where I got my first sub 3. So within, back to your question, Mike. So I think, let's say for argument's sake, within first, I don't know, 3-4 years, I was then at 2:59. I was now kind of like sub 3 marathon runner, and I still couldn't quite believe it. And I was pushing 17 minutes for 5K, and I was like, kind of pinching myself. So that's roughly the kind of time scales.
It's 17 minutes 5K. Is that park run? Is that your park run PB?
17. I think 17:06. I think 17:06 or 17:08 is the official park run PB. I unofficially scratched under 17, but it's unofficial. Do you know what I mean? It's just it was on a cycle track with Strava, nothing else. So,
Yeah.
But so that was the kind of rough times. Yeah,
I'll
and
just
then
say that all the best people have done Loch Ness 3 times as well, haven't they, Nicky?
I completely agree. I would keep going back. I actually invited my friend from Denmark, so I reciprocated the weekend, and he came over and did Loch Ness marathon with us, and did the whole bit, and he was completely in awe the weekend, in the Highlands of Scotland, on the banks of Loch Ness. He loved it. So no, that's actually one. I know it's a question that comes later on, but that's one of my favourite. I've got such a soft spot for that race. Just the whole atmosphere, the way the families and the kids come out, along those wee villages that are dotted along the course. It's brilliant. It's absolutely amazing event. I would encourage everybody to give it a go. And I know people slag it for being it's downhill. It's not downhill. It might be technically downhill. Aye, there's lots of uphills on that course. It's an absolute nutcase of a course to try and pace, but it's great fun. Love it. Absolutely love.
Yeah, that Doors is there at 18 miles. When you're running it, it's definitely a hill.
Aye, well, I know. Everybody gets nightmares about this hill, but it's funny because as I get more and more into ultra running, I'm kind of like, what hill? What's everybody talking about this hill? That's not a hill.
The last time I ran Loch Ness, and God knows how long ago it was, I ran West Highland Way in the same year. And they were doing some sort of TV interview afterwards, and I was a random person selected. And I said, I'd ran West Highland Way and I ran Loch Ness, and I found Loch Ness. I was meaning marathon. Marathon was harder than the West Highland Way because the marathon, you were basically sprinting for as long as you could, as hard as you could. Whereas West Highland Way, it's not.
So I can't talk, Mike. I'm doing West Highland Way later this year, and I've had one failed attempt a couple of years ago, West Highland Way. I know every inch of it. I've spent more time on the West Highland Way than I've probably spent with my family, if I'm being honest, in the last 10 years. So I know every inch of it, but I know exactly what you mean. That marathon, it's literally red lining the whole way.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
We've had previous guests that have done Loch Ness Marathon, and I've always said, never again. I'm not going back to road running. That's me. I'm away with the trails. But every single guest that seems to come on of late, do Loch Ness. So I think it might actually be on the cards for me soon as well now. You're talking me into this.
It's just one of those ones where the logistics and the it's as far removed from a rock up, walk to the start line, buzzer goes and away you go. It's as far removed from that as you can get. You've got to get bussed at 5 in the morning, 1,000 feet up a mountain, with another 30 odd buses, and you're looking about it, folk. This is just surreal. And then there's all these trucks waiting for you at the top of this isolated mountain. It's just, it's a surreal experience. It's great. I loved it.
So when you went from the 5Ks and the park runs to the marathons, before we move on to what you got onto later on, did you have a favourite distance that you like to race?
Question. I mean, at the time, I liked the idea of the 10Ks, the Brian Goodwins and stuff like that. I've forgotten the name of the rest of them, and the Troons. I liked that because it was back to that. It was absolute flat out 10K, red line the whole way, give it everything. You'll be done in 36, 37 minutes. It'll all be over quite soon. And I went through a period where I quite enjoyed that distance. Half marathon, again, it's similar, but in that you feels like a sprint for the whole 21 and a bit kilometres, marathon, all right, there's a wee bit less effort put in, but not much, but so I think I enjoyed 10Ks and I endured the halves and the marathons. I think that's probably a fair assessment. Every time I do a marathon, I'd be like, right, never again, beg that, and then I'd be right on looking for where the next one was. Where's the next one in 4 months? Dublin, right? I'm going to Dublin.
So, Nicky was saying about doing a road marathon. My running club, New Dunes, they had, I think it was 17 or 19 people doing Manchester the other week. It's just, that's like Loch Ness is our local marathon, and everybody went down to Manchester. So there must be something about it.
I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of Manchester, if I'm being honest, Mike. I had an awful day. I had a hip injury and I ended up limping the second half of it. But from an actual course point of view, I wasn't that taken away, if I'm being honest. Lots of kind of built up industrial type feeling areas and not very pretty, a lot of greyness going on. Listen, lots of folk might disagree with me, and I know I've got some very, very close friends that keep going back and love it, but not for me, if I'm being honest. There's lots of much nicer ones.
I guess Loch Ness is, although you're on the road, you're out in the countryside.
True.
It's totally different environment.
No, I know. I think that's part of the reason I've avoided London like the plague since I started running. See the idea of running through that busy city centre and just buildings everywhere and what have you. That just never ever appealed to me at all. I was going off to do things like Dublin and on my own, and Barcelona and like Aalborg, random, north of Denmark. So I would tend to kind of do the more kind of off the beaten track ones, like not that Barcelona's off the beaten track, but you know what I mean. Some of the nicer ones.
And it's interesting you say that, because I know there's a lot of debate that there's 1.1 million entered for London this year, I read somewhere. And a lot of people are saying there's so many other good marathons. If people are feeling inspired, go and enter another one that is more accessible. I'll be honest, anybody that knows me, London's my worst nightmare, just for the people. Like not the way the people are, just the volume of people.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I know what you mean. You mention it. You've just ran it the weekend there, haven't you?
I did. Yeah, I ran it a couple of weeks ago. And it was so there's always a backstory. But the reason I did it was because there's another cracker, Berlin. So my friend and I, Martin Gray, we went to Berlin last year. The two of us met up with some guys while we were there, but what a weekend. It was just a fantastic weekend. It was just one of those ones that will go down as a massive, never to be forgotten, just the whole event, the people, value for money, just everything. Such a beautiful city as well. Everything's just dead efficient and works. So we did that last year, and I need to watch what I say here. So I hadn't even really properly trained for it, but I went anyway, and that's kind of my attitude. If I'm being honest, as I get older, I don't stress about the 3 decimal places as much as I used to. If I feel kind of all right there or thereabouts, then I'll just kind of go with the flow and see what happens on the day, kind of thing. Less so when I was younger, when I'd fret and get all nervous about a couple of seconds here and there. That's not the case at all. So we went to Berlin, and we both had a cracking day. I mean, so much so, and again, don't want to brag, but I got a PB quite significant, 2:51. Like took several minutes off my previous PB. So it wasn't until we're then talking to it was actually a couple of guys from Giffnock, Andy Campbell, and we were talking about London and how the Good for Age opened the following week. So I didn't have a clue what the Good for Age meant. I always thought London was you've got no chance unless you buy, the £2,000 golden ticket kind of thing.
Yeah.
You've got no chance. But they were explaining the Good for Age was 310 for somebody my age. So with me with a 251, it wasn't a lottery for me. I would be absolutely guaranteed a place. Martin, he was in the same kind of camp with a 252. So basically, we decided before we left Berlin that we were going to do London. So much so we booked the flights when we were in Berlin, got home, did the Good for Age application, and we both got it. And so there's no more logic to our planning than behind it than that. It was just a complete happened to bump into a couple of guys from Giffnock walking through central Berlin.
I think what Boston do is the Good for Age for them is the more under the Good for Age mark, the better the chance of getting in. So if you're only 1 second
the same
under,
thing. Aye,
okay,
correct. Aye, that's what they were explaining. So on me with a 251 versus a 310 Good for Age, they're like you're at the thin end of the wedge. Yeah, you're at the thin end of the wedge. Somebody with a 3, as you say, 7, 8, or 9 might be kind of still all a bit of a lottery. So that's the only reason I went to London, if I'm being honest. And I did that as part of it's all part of a bigger picture, right? So I'm doing West Highland Way in a handful of weeks. So I went to London with the attitude of I'll use it as a glorified training run for West Highland Way. I wouldn't be chasing sub 250s or anything like that, because I'd been injured in January and February this year. I caught a viral infection the week before London, and just all the signs were there that I shouldn't even have went. And even on the Thursday night before the Friday flight, I was saying to the guys, look, I don't want to be a downer on this, but one thing's for sure, I'll go to London, I know that for a fact, but I might just be spectating. And I didn't decide until the night before the actual run itself that I was going to do it. So no heroics at London, just try and get to the end and not compromise my health or fitness for West Highland Way. Fingers crossed I didn't.
Still plenty of time if you did. You mentioned earlier about getting nervous about like taking seconds off your time. What about before a race? Do you still get nervous now?
I think less so, Mike. It depends what I'm setting out to do, if you know what I mean. The last few races, I've genuinely been quite relaxed getting into them because I've had such a big couple of years, last year in particular. That was almost like what I achieved last year. I kind of almost said it to my wife without saying it, like if I come back from Morocco in one piece and not blown the family budget and then completely embarrass myself, then I'll kind of retire from running, which never happened, by the way. But in my head, I was just determined to take a far more relaxed approach to running. But back in the earlier days, things like park runs, I was a bag of nerves, absolute bag of nerves. And I found the only way to control it was just suck up, just go off with your heart rate bouncing through the roof, and things would eventually settle down. dry mouth and like wee silly tricks that I learned or I taught myself. Maybe like a wee 300 ml water bottle, just to get me through that first 1 or 2 kilometers, just to take away the dryness in the mouth. I don't mean like fill it up to the brim, just enough for a wee sip, and it'd be enough just to. It's one less thing to think about. I think it's a horrible feeling when your mouth is dry as it, and it's just adrenaline. But then you start thinking you're dehydrated and all sorts of crazy thoughts go through your head. But no, as I say, I suppose it's what I'm trying to achieve in the event will kind of drive that level of nervousness. So I was.
So you're finding the more that you run and the further into it you get, the less nervous you're becoming, because that's something I massively struggle with before any event.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm actually going to an event where I'm meeting Mike a week on Saturday, and I know for a fact I'll be. I don't know if it's. I don't think it's nerves, because I'm not nervous. I'm not scared about it.
Yes.
But it'll just be sheer excitement, and I'll either be sick or I don't know.
I mean, listen. I'm not going to profess to be any kind of sports psychologist. I'm not. I've been doing this a wee while, and I think certainly for me. So speaking from personal level, right, and I'm not trying to project this onto you or anyone else, but see if you've got a whiff of imposter syndrome. It just balloons in your head, right? And it's all that. I felt that in my first ultra I did was the Devil of the Highlands, off the back of a comment a guy from Giftnut made. Ricky Swayze, he just said, John, Devil of the Highlands, you ought to consider it. Absolutely, you're designed for that, And the whole town was like, can he do that? It's not for me. That's for like superheroes like you. And even standing there on the start line, I'm like, what am I doing here? The longest I've run is 40 kilometres. I don't know what happens after that, So I suppose even up to that point, I was pretty nervous up to that point. And then reaching the 42 kilometre mark, and like, oh, you're in the death zone. You've got no idea what happens, and it's all this kind of, people going to jump out, what happens after 42k? And in actual fact, nothing really that different. It's just a wee bit more of the same. And if you haven't been going hammering it, then you should be able to repeat what you've done for the previous 10k. So it's not for me to suggest, Nikki, but for me, a lot of my nervousness was imposter syndrome. And then I think one of the things that helped me settle my nerves was just look at my results, just reflect on my results, you know, just quietly. There's some kind of statistic that only 2% of anybody that's ever run a marathon has been under 3 hours, so just little nuggets like that to yourself, just to reassure yourself. There's lots of people that would probably kill to do what you do. Because let's face it, it's pretty daft, what we do.
So Nikki, you just need to go out and run a 3-hour marathon, and then you'll be fine.
That's it. You're in the 2% club.
Mike, I think if I run a 3-hour marathon, it'll end in a box.
Never say never.
It was interesting, John, that you said about imposter syndrome, because I've read studies saying that people that are the best at their job usually have imposter syndrome. Yeah. So the fact that you're running 3-hour marathons, it relates to that, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It is a good point. I think I've probably read a lot of the similar stuff, because it's the same in a professional capacity as well, with me as well. Anything new I get into, there's always that air of, I started, like yourself, Nick, I started a new job there in January, and as much as I've been with the organisation 12 years, it's a different function, it's a different part of the business, it's different people, and again, it's all that not imposter, but that kind of new guy type nervousness. What am I doing here? Did I make the right decision? It's all the similar thoughts that go through your mind stood in the start line.
So I think this is a nice segue. Mike, did you have a question there before I move on?
No, on you go. I was
actually going to ask, from the marathons and the roads, how did we then progress on to trails and ultra marathons?
So I've always loved trails for a start. So I know I said I put on weight in my 30s, but at the same token, I get into bagging Monroes in my 30s as well. And I was loving that. So I think, I can't remember the last count. I think I did a couple at the weekend. I think I'm probably about high 80s, about 90. And I know loads of people have completed them. There's 280 and all that. And I'll probably never do that. But I did get into it and I enjoyed it. Daughter was quite young, so I couldn't get away a lot. But when I did, would maybe make like a weekend of it and do 4 or 5 in the weekend. So I really enjoyed that. Then what I found was if I ran them, obviously I could get round them a lot quicker and get back home. And I loved that idea. I mean, I've ran Ben Lomond something like, I don't know, I've lost count, maybe 12, 15 times, just because it was handy and I could go and I'd run on my own. An old pair of summer walking boots. Didn't have a clue what I was doing, putting on my feet at the time. But I loved it. Loved mountain biking. So I've always loved that, being outdoors. Never been the type to follow football or rugby or anything like that. You know, I'd much rather be out and amongst it. So I'd always loved the trails, Nicky. And for a long while, even playing about at the park runs, I'd quite often go to Pollock Park, wear a pair of spikes on and just run about the muddy forests and trails on my Todd during the week. Again, not really knowing what I was doing or why I was doing it, I just really enjoyed it. So the ultras, that came about, that boy from Giffnock, Ricky, he just happened to plant the seed about the devil, you know, being ideal because he could see my times. A, I don't know how he came to that conclusion. And B, I don't know, he did it as well, actually, that same year. So we kind of rocked up together, as I say, but he's like really experienced UTMB stuff, lots of stuff in Europe. And I just felt right out my depth. But again, I did it. I know numbers aren't everything, but I think I was like top 10 or top 11. And again, just looking back on the results, it was, you know, I know it's not the fastest. I know plenty of people with much faster times, but for me at that time, as a first, I was like, shit, I'm actually okay at this. You know, I was looking about all those people at the start line, looking at all these experienced, burly, you know, muscular ultra runners, and I'm stood there like, you know, this wee scrawny scale stick, like, oh no, what am I doing? So I kind of went from there, and then the pattern of behaviour just continued. It was like, right, what's the next one? I love this, and on it went. Things like, to name but a few, Great Glen, made a mess of West Highland Way, Dunoon, loved Dunoon. What others? Ardgarten, Bill introduced Ardgarten fairly recently. But all these races, absolutely love them. I think the only one I haven't done round about is the Fling.
The Great Glen, did you do the short course, the only 42 miles, or did you do the full Great Glen?
So both. I did I'll probably get the dates wrong. I think 2021, it was the first ultra after lockdown, after COVID. That was the long one. So I did whatever that is, 115 kilometres. Really did well at that, podiumed again, surprised myself, longest run I'd ever done. And then last year I did the short course, Great Glen short course, and again podiumed. Given that I hadn't really trained for that, and I had Berlin in my sights in like a few weeks after it, with a couple of weeks away and Playa del Carmen in between, you know. So it was a bit of a mishmash of a year last year.
Yeah, you say you podiumed at the short course, the Great Glen short course, but I think you won it, didn't you not?
I did. I did,
Yeah.
Mike. I won it.
And I was the slowest person in that race.
Were you?
Probably because I was a sweeper, but that's not the point.
All right, very good. It was funny because it was a very small field. There was only about 30 runners, but took off from Fort Augustus like an absolute. Because I know the route very well. Again, only ran the races twice, but I've spent a lot of time on that course. It's actually one of my favourite. So we headed off from Fort Augustus, and I took off like a whippet. As we get up that first hill, you come over the crest, and you get down the hill, and you're about to turn left up into the first forest. I looked behind, and there was this big guy behind me, like right on my heels. I was like, oh, I'm in for a day of it here, right? So I ran the rest of that race like he was just round the next corner, absolutely fearful that he was going to catch me at any point.
And was he
Anyway,
far
turns
behind you?
Listen, I don't worry, down that road. Let's just say there was quite a big gap in the end, but I had no idea. I came running across that finish line as if I was on fire. I ended up talking to his wife because she was like following him on the course, and giving him the updates and stuff like that. She went and said hello later on. She says, "Ah, it's my husband in second place." I knew how far ahead you were him, but she didn't crack a light. But no. So again, that's I think it's a question that comes up. That's one of my favourite courses, regards to kind of UK type ultra races that I've done anyway. I love the Great Glen.
Yeah, I would, maybe not my favourite, but one of my favourite, probably in the top 3, I would say. At one point, I had the course record for the long course and the slowest record for the short course.
It's not bad going. I think.
Sorry, John. I have a couple of questions for the back of your running from last year. So the first one is, do you have a coach?
Do I have a coach?
Yeah.
No.
Right, because I was going to ask, my next question was going to be, how does a coach manage having a marathon plan and an ultra marathon when you are training for road and trail and events? How does that work?
It's an absolute freak show, Nikki. Yeah. So bear in mind, I do coach people. Mm-hmm. And the first thing, so I'm not a hypocrite, right? Again, it's where I am in life, and it's what I want to do and what I want to achieve. If I was, so let's take it to extremes. If I was training for an absolute flat out Valencia marathon, or somebody came along to me and said, look, I want to do a 2:55 Valencia marathon in 18 weeks. My PB at the moment is 3:10. So their plan would look very different to someone's plan that, say, they want to do Valencia marathon in December and then they want to do the fling in March or April, whenever it is. I know it's moved to the first half of the year. So their plan would look very different. And that's the way I articulate to other people what I do. I cannot. So if you look at the London example, I cannot afford to neglect the West Highland Way discipline, the hills and the volume. So my speed work was that I was prepared to compromise the speed work on the run up to London, just because I couldn't do it all, and I was prepared to make that conscious decision. If I didn't have West Highland Way and London was the A race, the be all and end all, then it would have looked very, very different. Notwithstanding, I was kind of injured in January and February, couldn't walk a step. But does that make sense? Yeah. I think you can't be all things to all men all the time. You have to make compromises along the way. And listen, I'll say to folk that are coaches as well, it's not, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's yes, by all means, look at this year, but consider how this year will impact next year, and what how you can improve on next year from what you do this year. All that training doesn't just get lost and get forgotten about. So I try and coach people to think longer term and not just in the couple of months window that we happen to be in.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And basically, you pick your race.
You pick your race, you pick your events. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's. I mean, sometimes I'll have an intro conversation with somebody I'm coaching. I'll do a bit of this Q&A. What's on your wish list for this year, and what's your 5K and your 10K PBs, and hit you with a list like, they're doing 14 races this year, and they want to, you're like, oh, geez, right. and you plan to go flat out at everyone, well, I don't see why not. And you're like, oh, right, okay. So you've got to kind of dial that back and go back to that. Well, maybe not hammer every single one, maybe every second or third one, and used others as training events or, really quality run events. But still getting in, because at the end of the day, some people like the act of going to a race and seeing familiar faces and, just meeting friends that you maybe only see a couple of times a year. And I would never discourage anybody from doing that ever.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's sensible to just power back and don't worry about the number all the time, if that makes sense.
And how would somebody go about getting coached by you?
Just get in touch through any of the socials, Instagram, Facebook, through the website, Run Llama.
And how did that come about?
I had a weird dream in the middle of the night, Nikki. I'm only joking. So when I was
with the name.
No, the name's a trade secret. I can't share how that came about. No, how it came about was when I was coaching when my daughter was at Giffnock from the age of about 10 through 14, 15, I was coaching 2 nights a week and sometimes at the weekend. Now, when the horse and her studies started to kind of get a bit more involved, the athletics dialed back. And I didn't realise it was happening at the time, but I kind of found myself investing a lot of time in the club. And I don't know, I felt that I'd put my time in to the club and I was looking for a wee bit of me time back. So, so I backed away from the coaching from Giffnock. But then I found that this kind of gap in my life that I didn't realise, if I'm being truthful, and had a look about. Anyway, long story short, I thought, how could I then transfer all that coach and running experience to the adult arena? Because bear in mind, it was under 15s, under 17s. I was coaching at Giffnock, so that's what I did. I sat and pulled together a plan, or a concept, soft launch, just to gauge interest, and it's been great. Yeah, Chris and I have been really as successful as we've wanted to be. If I'm being truthful, we are happy and content with it, with the numbers of clients that we have at the moment, and we're doing the inaugural Air Ultra, Sunset Ultra, next month. So that's a real nail-biting moment, as you can imagine. I don't have any nails left whatsoever. I know on the surface I might appear cool, calm, collected, but behind the scenes, honestly, it's like the proverbial swan, like mayhem, organised
you
chaos.
have an army of volunteers ready to back you.
Listen, you better believe it, Nikki. Our very own Nikki here is on timing responsibilities. And she phoned me up the other day there, which was hilarious. She says, I'll do timing. And I'm like, big responsible job. Tick. She phones me up the other day. So what exactly is it you want me to do, John? I'm like, what do you mean? You've ran races. You see what timekeepers do. So, yes, Nikki's in charge of all.
It was the phone call. I was on a training run I was along the West Highland Way, which was mobbed, by the way, on my way back. And the phone's going ping, 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 because John's getting everything organised for this ultra. And he's like, right, Nikki, I think it says ages ago, Nikki, can you do timekeeping? Aye, no bother. Nikki, can you do timekeeping and on about laptops and things? I'm like, hold the bus. Are we not getting a timing company for this? No, Nikki, you're going to be standing there with your stopwatch. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Back to basics.
Absolutely. No, it's limited to 100 runners. So no, we're keeping it back to basics, as you say. No, you'll have one of these big illuminated kind of like stop clocks, on your table. So dead easy. Trust me.
And you know what? I'm actually looking forward. It's going to be a great event for people to come to.
It's going to be fantastic. the amount of people that's offered to volunteer, I've been utterly overwhelmed. It's been amazing. It really has. There hasn't been a panic in that respect at all. We've got probably more marshals than we need. We've got volunteers for absolutely every aspect. So no, the volunteer community have been absolutely amazing. I cannot thank everyone involved enough.
And for those that don't actually know, because John and I are involved in this, John, can you explain the format for this race? What's unusual about it?
Aye, so there's a few unusual aspects. And the first one is it's through the night, so it's a 10:30 start on Irvine Beach Park. So it starts at 10:30 p.m. and it runs for about 95% of the entire route on the sand along Irvine Beach. A couple of wee bits where you come off, where you've got to go around the various harbours, but otherwise you're on the beach, 25 kilometres out down to the end of Ayr Beach, and then back again. So it's an out and back, 25k each way. So it'll be really interesting. The beach and the sand itself can be quite. If the tide's out, you'll be surprised just how fast you can go on the sand. But the flip side is, if the tide's in and you've only got 20, 30 feet of a slither of soft sand, that's a very different experience for folk. That's like running in deep snow or ankle deep snow. So we'll see. I've actually looked at the tides, but I'm not going to give it away what they are.
Well, what time does it start at?
Yeah, 10:30 p.m, Mike.
And how long would you say? 50k? So some of the slow runners are going to be taking, what, 7-8 hours?
Easy. I think so, Mike. The window will be...
in the sand, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think the winning time, I'm going to put it out there, and I'm basing this, Mike, on... So I've done a couple of recce runs on it, and I know the effort I've put in. I think the kind of winning time will be around 3:45, 3:50. And I'm kind of basing that on my experience. And I know some of the kind of faster runners are there as well. So I can gauge them against me, if you know what I mean. So I think the winning time will be coming in a bit before half two. And as you say, it could be 8 hours if folk are power hiking it.
Yeah.
And I think tide cycles go in 6-hour cycles. So
Right.
The slow runners are going to be, they're going to get it no matter when you're starting.
Pretty much. But then, no, listen, it's not complete. You always get that degree where, the tide's been in and it's going out. Does that make sense? There's always that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but there's always that slightly wee bit of wet sand that's just a wee bit harder packed than the soft stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the event. Everything, fingers crossed, is ready to go. Medals, trophies, all the merch. Hopefully the trophies and the merchandise themselves will be a talking point, because we want to do something unique. We don't just want to do a kind of copy and paste of other events. It's really quite unique. The trophies in particular. Nikki, did you see them? I did.
Yeah. They're crackers, absolute belters. Everyone is in for a treat, and you know what? The medals are just second to none. They're fantastic. They're absolutely I'm biting my tongue because I don't want to give anything away.
I know. But all I will say is I explained this to somebody the other day there. So Chris is a creative genius, right? I'm not. So I deal with governance and process with the councils and stakeholders, and getting the due diligence done. And Chris just gets allowed to run completely creativity. Kind of quite proud of it. Go mental on the creative stuff, So the trophies are literally an insight to the inner workings of Chris's mind.
And it's an ultra at night on the beach. Of all the places that you could have set an ultra, why the beach?
Again, don't want to hark back to MDS, but a lot of the training I did for MDS, I trained for MDS for about 18 months to 2 years, and a lot of it was on the sand.
Sorry, for
So,
the listeners who don't know, what is MDS?
oh, beg your pardon, right? So Marathon des Sables is a 6-day multi-day event in the Sahara Desert. Self-supported event, yeah, in the Sahara Desert. I did that last year. And for my 50th, it was around about this time. Last year, I flew to Gatwick on the 10th of April, and then I flew to Morocco on the 11th, and my birthday was the 11th. So you couldn't have timed it better. So it was one of my it was my bucket list item to do Marathon des Sables. So that was last year. As I say, got to carry everything yourself. All they give you is water and a sheet of canvas over you at night time. 252 kilometers over. It's over 6 days, but it's over 5 runs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They give you a 2-day allowance for the 90-kilometer run.
Mm-hmm.
But for the faster runners, myself included, if you're doing that in 12 hours, then you essentially get a day off, a rest day, you know. So heart goes out to those folk that are still out there plugging away, you know, through the midday sun on day 2. You know, they're the real superheroes of the event, if I'm being honest. So I trained for that for about 18 months, 2 years, basically running about morning and night with a backpack on and as much as I could on the sand. The Irvine Beach is only 20 minutes from my front door, so it's really, really handy. So I spent a lot of time on Irvine Beach training, and it was on one of those occasions I just had this idea that why don't we turn it into a race? So Chris jumped at it, and next thing we know, we're onto the council talking about due diligence processes and governance and first aid strategy and you name it. So I've actually got the Coast Guard. Oh, that's another unique element. I've got the Coast Guard supporting us for the entire event. They're offering the first aid assistance. So anybody has a tumble or whatever, then they phone the Coast Guard. So I was talking to them. I just think this is really cool, right? Maybe it's just me, but I was talking to the lady, you know, that heads up that Coast Watch building at Irvine Beach, and she said, she says, "Oh, if anybody has a serious tumble, don't worry. You phone us. You don't phone, 999 anybody else. You phone us. We can have the helicopter over from Belfast much faster than it can have an ambulance from Paisley." I was like, "What?" So I don't know any other ultra other than MDS where you get the option of a helicopter that can bail you if
and
you
can
have
I just say that that's not an option for people? That is only
well, that's not
end.
part of the standard. You might have to pay for that. I didn't go into detail, but the fact that that's if things went that badly, which they won't, it's on sand, right, and it's flat as a pancake. But I just thought that was a cool one-liner. That'll stick with me. That.
Yeah. Going back to being nervous, what are you most nervous about for this race?
So many small aspects, just so many small bits, components, just all coming together at the right time, just for it to be a success for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose there's loads of wee things, but I think we've been really diligent in going through what they look like. We've got the marshals, we've got the aid stations. I can't think of anything, but you never know, Mike. That's why we're going basics on the timing. So it'll be a glorified stopwatch with a bit of paper, number and name. Don't want to rely too much on electronics; it might fail. It's a beach setting. We'll have a generator, but what if something happens to that? So that's the thought process at the moment.
Yeah,
we've got a camper van, but what if something happened to that? So where there is a kind of a risky piece of the jigsaw, we have tried to have a contingency in place. All the kind of other material components like race numbers and the goodie bags and merch and all that's already arrived in here. The numbers arrived today, actually. They're also looking great, Nikki. So that was one of the last pieces. So it's just all of those bits, Mike. I think if I was still sat here waiting on a delivery from China for some stuff, I might be a wee bit nervous. But yeah, it's just all that, the idea of, you have this concept, you put it out there. I mean, it's sold out. So we limited it to 100 runners in the first year. And if I'm, share this with you and the listeners. So Chris and I, we had no idea how it would go down. And we had a private conversation that went along the lines of, look, if 20 people sign up, we'll put it on, but we'll put it on the shoestring. There'll be no bells or whistles. It'll just be really, really basic. If 50 people turn up, then it will be a complete success. And it sold out 100 people in less than 10 days.
Yeah.
And as he was saying, so he's responsible for Entry Central type of admin. I was away on holiday at the time. He was giving me like daily updates, and it was every day. It was another 10 got another 10, another 10. It's like, oh shit, this is actually quite serious.
But I think there's that many people, especially like within the Scottish community, that is a really small number, and it's very, very, for it being inaugural. A lot of people like the exclusivity of that. I mean, I considered it myself. Thought, this is but knowing what I would have wanted to have done for my plans this year, this is my part of the involvement. Right, well, I'm not going to race it, but I want to volunteer. So
yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I might have mentioned earlier on as well, part of the logic for holding it where it was the whole training for MDS, but I'm very, very mindful that a lot of the ultras in Scotland in particular, everybody's got to head up the A9 or up the A82. They're all kind of centred around about West Highland Way, Great Glen. They're not all, obviously, of course, there's Rannoch and Glenfred. I know there's not, but Ayrshire's a part of the country where I can't think of any other than the River Ayr Way.
Yeah.
And also 50% of all participants are female, which we're very proud of as well. Yeah, and that there's no quotas or what do you call it, positive advertising on that. It's just first come first serve, and 50% of females.
I was going to ask, was that intentional, or is that just?
Oh no, not at all. That's just the way it's fallen. Yeah.
Fabulous.
I know.
You said about being nervous about waiting for a shipment coming over. Last time I directed a race, it was just a running club race, but I had my Garmin, a display watch so other people would see it, and the clock on my phone, and I set them all off going at the same time, and the display clock, when it came to an hour, it was about 30 seconds out. I was like, well, chuck that in the bin then, I'll just use my Garmin.
But Mike, see when I did Berlin, similar story. I did Berlin, just went through the usual routine, Garmin, fancy watch, never failed me, got me through MDS on a single charge, because it's a fancy solar one, the best of the best on the market at the time, blah, blah, blah. Started Berlin, and then the stats that were thrown back to me were absolute foreign language stuff. It said I was going like walking pace. Yeah. And it just wouldn't calibrate. It just wouldn't calibrate at all. And up until halfway. So actually, if you look at my Strava in Berlin, it will still look as if I took much longer than I did, because the stats are just all over the shop. It wasn't until about halfway that it started to kind of calibrate my actual pace in the moment. And I could see that was making sense. But the average up to that point had me doing like a 4.5 hour marathon. It just made no sense at all. So I did a lot of that running on fuel. But back to your point, relying on technology. It's hence why Nicky's got a printed out spreadsheet.
Well,
that'll be fine. That'll be cool.
The questions tonight, I've got them sitting on the computer. We're talking on the computer. We've got a chat going back and forth if we ever need it. We haven't tonight. Nicky's still got the questions printed out in a bit of paper.
Me and all.
And speaking of them, I don't actually think we've actually stuck to the question set in the order.
Not at all.
It's fine. I'm looking through it. You're right. I think we've covered a lot.
Well, one of the next ones I'm going to ask off of the actual question set, and I'm going to give you two options for this. I would like to know, what is your favourite event? I'm not going to be exclusive. What's your favourite road event, and what's been your favourite trail event?
I think road. Think it's got. I think Berlin, but Barcelona was bloody magic as well. Just two very well executed weekends. Just brilliant. Everything about them was just perfect. Berlin is such a lovely place, as I said earlier on. Everything just works. Value for money. It's wee daft things like going out for a meal and actually asking the waiter, "You sure you charged enough?" Because things were so good value for money. Two people could eat out like kings for 20 quid. It was the weirdest thing. Everything just worked like clockwork. So Berlin probably road event, with Barcelona close second, and a trails. Well, it goes without saying, MDS is like nothing comes close to me personally. But that was a bucket list, and I know it's quite exceptional. I don't know. I think Great Glen. I think I touched on it before. I love Great Glen. I love the fact that it's like two races in one. You get your head down on that first 50k, knowing that the hills are coming, and that's cool because actually by that time you're looking forward to them. I just like that kind of split nature of it, and just the different landscapes and sceneries. I think there's loads to choose from. There's loads. I love Dunoon. I love Little Ardgarten. How couldn't you love Ardgarten, right? You know what I mean? But if I had to pick, there you go, one of each.
Ardgarten looks a cracking race. I mean, is that 2-3 years that's been running now? And that, again, this is one of these ones that's quite exclusive. There's not many participants get into it.
Yep. Done it 3 times now. Yep. And it's one of our kind of popular training runs that we use, the guys that I run with.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did it actually go ahead last year? It was postponed anyway because of the wind.
Oh no, it went ahead last year or this year.
This year, Storm Owen cancelled the original date, I'm sure, and then it got postponed.
But the original date, but then there was a change of route. Was that year? Because I've done it every year. It was 3 years. First year was normal route. Second year was alternative route. I think that's what it was. It was because I ran it with a bag 1 year as a training run.
Yeah, because that was
that.
I met you.
That was the that's absolutely correct. So that was the alternative route year, Nikki. That's right. And then this year I ran with Roberta Fletcher, and she smashed, took 45 minutes off her PB.
Brilliant.
I know. So great experience has been, but completely different. No two being the same.
So going from fast marathons to trail ultras and everything in between, how do you fuel for your races?
Fuel?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So things like a marathon, I'm very clinical, very clinical. I don't obsess too much about carb loading. I do a wee bit, but I don't go over the top on the days running up to a marathon. Your body can only store so much glycogen anyway, and you don't really want to get to a point where you even consider depleting it, to a point, around about that 20k mark. I think the human body can hold about 20-25 kilometers worth of glycogen. But so my strategy is always get about 10 kilometers in, give or take. Like your breakfast, whatever that is, fuel, your journey to the start, all that nervousness, all that build up, your first 10 kilometers or so, and then it's on average for me 2 or 3 gels every hour. So fingers crossed, if I've only got 2 and a bit hours to go, I'm looking about 6 gels, that'll carry in a belt for marathons. I say I'm quite clinical with that. If it's a hot one, I'll add salt tablets. If not, I won't bother. And I am the world's worst because I always come back with like 2 spare gels that I haven't used.
Do you have a gel preference?
What's that?
Do you have a gel preference? Do you have a brand you like?
I do, Nikki, actually. I do a precision hydration for a no messing about serious stuff. Don't get me wrong. They'll hate me for saying this, but sometimes I think you've got to remortgage your house to keep going on them because they aren't cheap. But Christ, they're good. The other end of the spectrum, High Five. I really like the viscosity of High Five. They're not very jelly. They're more liquidy, if you know what I mean. So dead easy. They're more like a wee kind of drink than a gel. I do like them, and I do use them a lot for training runs because I'm a tight arse and I'm not going to fucking buy precision hydration for running about where I stay on a Wednesday night. So they are my two to go to in bigger runs, much bigger stuff. I try and keep a very simple formula. So for the likes of, if you look like Great Glen, I think there's six drop bags for every 20k, give or take. So I just have a formula for 20k and repeat 6 times. I don't kind of really go daft with what's in the bags. I just try and keep it consistent. And that'll be things like, my new favourite thing is Haribo's actually. They're like 97% carbs. Haribo's, see from a carb return, they're like off the charts. And they just provide something different to normal gels and what have you. Or any of those sweeties. Actually, I bought some tonight when I was having a moment earlier on. I was needing an energy boost. Jelly Tots. There's a new version of Jelly Tots that come out, and they're tangy and they're flipping brilliant. Again, 97% carbs. So things like that will always appear in the bag. Things like, I'm a big fan of Ella's Kitchen, the baby food. I've mentioned before in numerous conversations and social media. I'm a big fan of banana and coconut. Again, it's not going to blow your brains with carb return, but it's just to give you a different texture, taste, flavour, just something else to add into the mix. So yeah, what else? That'll pretty much keep me going, if I'm being honest. Haribo's, Ella's Kitchen. I'll throw a banana in maybe every second drop bag. I usually never touch it, but it's there as a just in case. Equally, maybe if it's a bit of a longer event, bagels with Nutella that are chopped up into bite-sized chunks. They're quite a kind of go-to. I know they're quite dry as well, but again, just gives you something different to chew on as you're on the move.
Yeah, I don't find that bananas travel very well. If you've got one of them in the bottom of your bag and you don't eat it, and you find it the next day.
Yeah.
Aye, I know what. So you've either got to eat it there and then at that checkpoint, and the chances are you don't really feel like it, and you want in and out anyway. And the short Great Glen, what was great was, I'm always experimenting with stuff, incidentally, so although I try and keep it quite simple, I'm always, giving other things a try, like, see the wee mini pots of ambrosia rice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're brilliant. They're absolutely magic, I find. Again, it's purely just for a different flavour and texture. It's not going to set any records with carb return, but again, it's just something different to look forward to if you know it's coming up ahead.
Do you ever take the carb drinks like Tailwind or Active route, or do you just go off water?
Sorry. No, sorry, I should have said all of that is complemented with Tailwind. Always. Right. Aye, it's always Tailwind. Used to be Active route. I don't know why I went off Active route actually. I was getting fed up with the ginger flavour, but they do a cracking kind of green tea type.
They do a peppermint as well.
Yeah.
Aye, it's that one. It's more of a umami. I think quite a. I can't quite describe it, but I quite like that. But I've gone back to Tailwind. Go back to what I know.
Well, you said earlier that you're doing the West Highland Way this year. 100 kilometres in is Jelly Baby Hill, so I'll be at the top of there handing out Jelly Babies, so you'll have one reserved.
Good man, because last time I did it, I made an arse of it. I had to stop at a Bridge of Orchy
Oh, well, there's your incentive. You have to come and see me.
96k in, and it's like, come on, really? But aye, it's fine. I'm not going to go over that one again. It wasn't for me that day.
So you went over your fueling during the race. What about out with the race? Yeah, you said you don't carb load that much, but just on a daily basis, what kind of things, like high carb, low carb, high protein, whatever?
I'm quite a regiment. So first and foremost, we're virtually a vegetarian family. Virtually, my daughter is 100% strict vegetarian, so I'm the cook, I'm the chef in the house. So it's much easier for me at the weekend to batch cook, be it chilies, spag balls, curries, etc., etc. So I tend to batch cook over the weekend, and it'll last us. So there's always a good mix in every meal. If I'm being honest, Mike, so your cauliflower and chickpea curries and stuff, very, very healthy with maybe broccolis as well. You've got all your proteins from call it a veggie chili, but it's more like a bean stew. It's like a 5 bean stew. So I'm ordinarily we're quite healthy in that respect. I tend to always go for a big salad every lunchtime. I'm just a creature of habit. I work from home, and that I know it's high in fibre and all that, but again, it's a good balance. Breakfast is always pretty much porridge with Greek yogurt. Again, getting plenty of protein in there. Fruits, frozen mango. Get a soft spot for frozen mango. I love frozen mango and pretty much it. So it's relatively balanced. Volume wise, probably eat quite a lot. Just to fuel. Evenings, I'm a big pasta fan, but I was listening to a nutritionist last week, and she was saying, the trick with pasta is to, which I'll use the exact word. She says, don't eat pasta naked.
Mm-hmm.
So dress it up with protein of some description, and it's all to do with the kind of sugar absorption into the bloodstream. So basically, the bloodstream will absorb the protein before it absorbs the carbs, and in the round, it's better for you if you do that. But I come in tonight from a big run, put on a pot of pasta, and nothing but pesto in it, and hoovered it like it was my last meal. So I try and be well behaved most of the time.
I think you've got to, if you need the fuel, you've got to fuel your body. It needs it, whether it's the good or bad. It needs the fuel.
Absolutely. I don't calorie count. I don't feel I've ever had to. My weight is, I can tell. I mean, I can tell. So see when I go 100 kilometers plus a week, I can just tell how much more I need to consume. Because you just start feeling that wee bit more tired. Equally, if the mileage is a bit lower, then I know when to hold back on the biscuits and ice cream and that.
Well, you still need the biscuits and ice cream for that treat, though. This is why I run.
No, let Nicky.
So you mentioned you ran with your big bag for MDS for training. Is that one of your favourite pieces of running kit, or do you have an absolute favourite you wouldn't go without?
For that 2-year period, I couldn't go without that bag. That was part of my body. It was just part of my existence. Still have it, tough as old boots. You could throw it out a moving train, and I kid you not, it wouldn't even pick up a scratch. It's a cracking bag. I love it to bits. That is my all-time fave. I do like my watch as well. I know I just slagged it for going a bit belly up in Berlin, but it's the only watch that had the capability of keeping a charge the entire length of MDS that didn't need, a separate charger. There was guys carrying like 500-gram chargers on their backs and stuff like, and solar chargers, and I'm like, fucking hell, you know, you're cutting wee straps off your bag to reduce the weight and stuff like that, you know. And these guys are carrying these big lithium batteries, and I wonder why they can't get their bag below 10 kilos. It's
What make was your bag, and what is it?
it's called Ultimate Direction.
Right.
It's one that's kind of like not designed specifically for MDS, but it's right up there with the top 3 most popular bags for MDS. The multi-day event type bag, Ultimate Direction 25 litre. It's perfect in every way. So that would be me. Oh, my latest bit of fancy kit is my North Face trainers. They are absolutely amazing. Can't remember them making them. Trail shoes, but those ones that are kind of wee bit rounded at the bottom and they're a bit kind of rocky. They're absolutely amazing.
And maybe answer this: when you're out in the desert in the Sahara in Morocco or in the streets in Irvine, what do you think about when you're running?
Very different things when you're in the desert versus urban.
Is it survival in both places?
That's what I mean. Usually in urban stuff like that, it's like as long as I can run faster than the Neds, then I'm fine. No, I mean the desert. Right, joking aside, see when you take away all luxuries, all mod cons, everything, you're stripped bare of the back, but you know everything's gone. Your phone, there's no internet, there's no Facebook, there's no social media, there's nothing. The only bit of tech you've got is your watch, and that is it, right? It's so liberating. Your mind just goes nuts. See the dreams you have. It's just because you've got this extra headspace, so your mind goes into overload. Don't get me wrong, when you're running, it's all about in the moment and checking pace, keeping an eye on fluids. You're always managing, you know, your situation at that moment in time. Do you have enough fluids to get to the next aid station? Yes, no. If no, what you're going to do about it? You know, it's that kind of thing. Is that thorn in your shoe really a big problem? Do you need to stop, or are you going to hike the sand dunes? You're going to run them? Blah 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 blah. What's your pace like? So that's always keeping you busy. But generally, running about for me is it's a wee bit. I think I do what I do when I'm swimming as well. I do a lot of problem solving in my head. If I'm being truthful, I think swimming is easier to do because you're taking away some of the other environmental distractions when you're in the pool. But I found that I do a lot of problem solving on a kind of professional level, or you know, even kind of personal stuff, family stuff. If you're just struggling with a situation, I try and devote that time. I don't listen to music at all ever, so I'm always listening to what's going on. As I say, try to solve the next problem. It's just round the corner.
And you may have just answered my next question. Where you're swimming, do you cross train? What do you do when you're not running?
I try, Mike. I do try. I'm not the world's worst, but I'm fairly typical in that. See, if I'm injured, I'm like the most popular guy in the pool. You know, I'm like there twice a day. It's like, oh, you're back again. Yeah, surprise, surprise. You know, limping into the pool. So I'm kind of bad in that respect. I'm a fairly decent swimmer. And I don't do enough of it, and I love it. But it's because running just takes up so much more time. I do try and make time on a Monday to get out on the bike. If it's the road, again, be honest with you, I prefer mountain bike because you can spend less time on it, you know, up down the trails and a wee bit more technical, time permitting. So I do try and do the 3 disciplines, not as much as I would like to, if I'm being truthful. But then it hits winter and I tend to get on a static bike a hell of a lot more as well. So, and nice segue actually, because I know one of the questions, what's next? So I am doing Aviemore triathlon in September. So
You've read my mind there. I was going to say, have you done a triathlon or considered?
So the answer, yes, I've done one. I did Bishopbriggs years ago and loved it. Don't ask me why I've never gone back and done another one. Loved it, enjoyed it, did really well at it. Say decent swimmer, no bad runner. Haven't really invested in the bike. got like a 20-year-old Carrera that's an utter embarrassment, but I took it along and I did all right, and the results speak for themselves. So I'm going to spend a wee bit more time on the swimming and the bike in preparation for Aviemore. Mike, back to your point, I'm going to be a lot more focused. It isn't a full triathlon. It's kind of like, I think it's a kilometre swim, 18k and a 12k run, but it's all trail. So you're on a mountain bike, not a road bike. And it's a trail run, not a road run. So I think that suits my style of running and biking quite good.
Would you ever fancy Ironman or Keltman?
No. Getting too old for that shit, Nicky.
You're never too old.
Like that.
Absolutely not. Never too old.
Maybe. Never say never.
I've got a deep question for you that I find it sometimes awkward to ask, but who would you like to run with, either alive or not, fictional or not?
Full disclosure, I did see these questions yesterday, right? And I've just finished this book. And you're going to think, where am I going with this? But it's so relevant. It's so relevant to me. Most of the listeners of yours will never have heard of him. They might have, but so the book is The Forgotten Highlander. So this is a chap called Alistair Urquhart. And let me just read, if it's okay, can I read the summary, the intro to the book?
Yeah, on you go.
So Alistair Urquhart was a soldier in the Gordon Highlanders, captured by the Japanese in Singapore. He not only survived working on the notorious bridge of River Kwai, but he was subsequently taken on one of the Japanese hell ships, which was torpedoed by the US. Nearly everyone else on board died, and Urquhart spent 5 days alone on a raft in the South China Sea, shark infested, I should say. Before being rescued by a whaling ship, he was then taken back to Japan and then forced to work in a mine near Nagasaki. 2 months later, nuclear bomb dropped just 10 miles away. And he felt the heat from that bomb, right? There's something about, so when you listen to the story, that obviously that just skims the surface, right? Some of the stuff he endured, couldn't repeat, right? Because it wouldn't be fit for listeners' consumption. It's horrific, right? And I genuinely just finished it last week. So when I saw that question, who would you run? I'd run with him, and I'd do nothing, talk about that survival instinct, and when you're at Bridge of Orchy crying into your cornflakes, thinking the world's over and everybody owes you something. I would love to hear his story in person. He died many years ago. I think he died in the late 90s or early 2000s. He ended up being a sheep farmer in Skye or something like that. But so think about that. He taken prisoner of war, which in itself, that was concentration camp. Difficult stuff to survive in its own. Put in this ship that the Americans torpedoed by accident because the Japanese didn't put a first aid flag on it. Anyway, he survived that, and then, as I say, number 3 was he felt the waft of the atomic bomb, and he survived that as well. So I just think that was, I want to spend time in his company.
Good answer.
That is a great answer.
So sorry, it's not a Kipchoge kind of answer.
No,
I think it's a great answer.
The question is, what do you want, not what the generic. So yeah, good answer.
Yeah. There you go.
So you've done pretty massive events. You've done London, you've done Berlin, you've done MDS. Have you got other bucket list races now left to tick off?
Okay, I think if I start talking about those type of events in the house so soon, I'd probably be showing the door. But between you, me, and the listeners, maybe something like Moab 240 or Badwater. Now, I haven't looked in detail on the entry requirements to these events. I know Debbie Martin Consani has done Badwater, obviously, and her and I had a chat offline and kind of lead up to MDS and what have you, so I know there's sources of information, close by, but those are the two events that kind of were on my radar. Both hot events, obviously, but I think with the right training, I think I do prefer the hotter stuff. The colder stuff doesn't appeal to me, if I'm being honest. And stuff in the jungle and all that, I don't know. Nah, I couldn't be bothered clambering up and down tropical rainforests, for nearly 2 weeks in the middle of Peru. I did at one point, but no, I think something like Moab or Badwater might be on the hit list at some point before I'm 55.
Going back to the roads, do you have a desire to complete the majors?
No, I don't, Nikki. I was trying to convince my wife to go to Japan early next year. Didn't tell her it was to do the marathon. I was like, special birthday pet, we'll go to Japan. In Japan. It's like, oh, it's lovely. I've been looking at it a lot lately, but see, trying to get Japan, Tokyo, sorry, trying to get in. It's just, again, they seem to be like that. I won't bore you with too much personal. I mean, I might experience the same issues with Moab and Badwater, but don't want to get all political, but I've been to Cuba a few times, and in doing so, it makes getting into the States quite difficult.
Yes.
So the lads that I run with, they've all done Boston, Chicago, and what have you. And I don't know if in my subconscious I'm not interested in them because I know the hurdle that I need to go over. When you've got to go in person to the US Embassy, all the family to be personally interviewed and all that. And I don't know, that just seems like a bit diabolic, too far for me. But as I say, I might experience that if I considered Moab or Badwater. But I don't know, maybe the political situation would have changed by then. Who knows? The rules relaxed, but as it stands at the moment, it's pretty tough.
Well, not unless we get rid of a certain person in charge of America at the moment. But, well, we'll not go into that one.
No, it's no point.
Yeah, I went to Cuba, and my passport expired, say, a year later, and then I went to America, but because I didn't have the stamp on my passport, they didn't know.
Oh, right, okay, Mike, that's interesting, because mine's is also expired. So I remember saying you met that Danish couple in Cuba, 12 years ago, and we went back again 2 years ago. But I've since had a new passport. Anyway, so I totally digress from the subject I'm running, but immigration rules for the States.
Yeah.
Random.
I've got one more question to ask. I don't know if Nikki's got anything else.
No.
She's not speaking up. Okay. If you could go back in time to 2013 when you were 39 and you started running, what would be your biggest bit of advice that you'd give to yourself about running? Sorry, I didn't prep you for this one because I only thought about it.
I know. It's a good call. It's a good call. It would be something like invest in a research, hydration, nutrition earlier on in your running career. I think it would be that. And research and understand the importance of that. I think that's the one element that was all of it. Trial and error and up in the air. So I make a point of everybody approaching at the moment. I make a point of, kind of laying out almost like a formula, 70 to 90 carbs an hour, during extreme exercise, be it training or racing, and 400 to 500 mils of fluids, irrespective. So I make a point and really label that point, but I didn't have a clue when I was barting away park runs on my Todd and writing up wee fag packet plans on an A4 sheet on how to do a marathon for myself as well. So I would research and structure what I was doing better. That's what I'd do. I'd get myself a coach, Run Llama.
Right. I think that's going to wrap us up. We've chatted away about everything and nothing. Probably lots of questions that you weren't prepared for, but you answered them perfectly. So from me,
Okay.
it's thank you, Nikki, for being Nikki. Thank you, John, for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening. So it's goodbye from me.
Thanks, John.
Thanks again, Mike. Thanks, Nick. It's been a pleasure.